Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin, in this episode 445. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPen89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing on a very special Victory Monday? I will say all around special Victory Monday.
Yeah, go blue. Go birds. Go Bridges. And go Bills winning the snow game.
Shouldn't it be Fly Eagles Fly?
Go Birds is you don't know. You're not like us. So
yeah, you're not going to sing the song for us.
I think I'm a little too old for that. So
I don't know, man. Maybe some old people singing that shit at the stadiums. All right.
Oh, you mean Fly Eagles Fly? I think meant they
Yeah.
not like us. I
No.
can sing that maybe. Maybe it's for another. When we win the Super Bowl, I'll do
that. We're not here to talk about football, although we might talk about football. But before we do talk about anything, I do have to make a few announcements. First, we the Strickland has a YouTube channel where you maybe watch the podcast. If you are and not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.thestrick.land. There's a link to the merchandise store, and you can find all kinds of cool stuff on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland, this podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bozos, podcast hosted by Andrew Seal, a.k.a. Doug, along with Zach Blatter. And you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod, where I rant and rave about the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. And you get access to Strictly NFL, which is a podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Constantine Metricos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits, like listening on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, NHL to entertainment and political props. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline. The game starts here. So the Knicks certainly had a weekend. They won one of the probably what will go down as arguably their most disgusting victory of the season on Friday at noon. Just a very weird game against the Charlotte Hornets.
without LaMelo Ball. I mean, I don't want to clown the Hornets unnecessarily, but they were.
No, it was they put up a great effort, but yeah, they did not have LaMelo Ball. They did not have Mark Williams. They did not have Nick Richards. They're very shorthanded. They did not have Miles Bridges, although that might be a good thing both for them and for humanity. The Knicks, they won a game 99-98. Again, really, really disgusting game. It was basically a 99-95. They hit a three in the last seconds of the game that did not matter. Anyway, Knicks come out, they eked out a victory, and they did have to eke it out. They were down 6 at one point in the fourth quarter, but they managed to pull that out. The prevailing concern after that game, at least for me, was not so much that the Knicks struggled in that game, because I think it was a very weird start time. It was the end of a long West Coast trip where they're looking forward to getting back home. It's the day after Thanksgiving. You're probably, look, I think it's fair. Like, these guys are human too. When you've been traveling, like, you want to be with your family and people you care about on Thanksgiving. You're not. It all plays a part of it. But yeah, the fact that they played a tight game against an underhanded Hornets team really was not that concerning to me, because 82 game regular season, weird shit happens all the time. I don't think one-off instances like that are necessarily something to freak out about. Yes, I know that they've already lost to Atlanta and they've lost to Chicago. I would say as frustrating as those losses are, I think they're a different kettle of fish to what this Hornets team was, which I do think is a one-off. But the thing I was concerned about is Mikal Bridges playing, honestly, probably the worst offensive game you could ever imagine from him in this. Truly atrocious, horrible decisions, terrible shots, sloppy turnovers, lack of confidence, putting the ball on the deck. And it was so apparent and obvious that after the game, Tom Thibodeau, Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson all had to answer questions about what's going on with Mikal. How do you guys get Mikal going? Are you concerned? What's your concern level? Et cetera, et cetera. And look, they all answered them in the appropriate ways that they should be answered. But it was obviously a rising concern. The Knicks then got to play a game yesterday at 6 p.m., a more normal tip-off time at home at Madison Square Garden. And it was against a similarly depleted Pelicans team. And they made mincemeat of them. And not only did they make mincemeat of them, but very specifically, Mikal Bridges was the one leading the charge. He played an excellent game. He shot the shit out of the ball, shot with confidence. He hit 7 threes, which I believe ties his career high from beyond the arc. He had a couple of nice cuts on the ball. I thought he showed more aggression in terms of he looked sharper when he had the ball in terms of trying to, attack the defense. Did not get to the free throw line. He did get to the free throw line in Charlotte in the weakest way possible, which is funny. But he did not get to the free throw line yesterday. But overall, just a much more aggressive performance. I thought his defense yesterday was a lot more focused, a lot more committed, a lot more forceful. And that's really what stood out to me. Obviously, yeah, when you make shots, it's all that always will pop. But I just thought that he played with a good level of aggression and force yesterday, which has basically been the underlying theme of his struggles early in the season is a timidity, a softness in the way he's playing on both ends of the floor, not just on offense, on defense as well. His point of attack defense has not been great. He has not done a good job of fighting over screens, getting through screens, getting back in front of his man. He's really, really struggled with all of it. And he needed that game yesterday. I think we all needed him to have that game yesterday for our own mental well-being, at least for 48 hours until we play Orlando on Tuesday, tomorrow night, which will be an extremely challenging opponent. They are a physical team. They are one of the elite defensive teams in the NBA, and they've won 12 of 13. So this will be a good test, not just for the Knicks, but also for Mikal Bridges. But I guess where I'll throw it back to you is, as Mikal Bridges has gone through these struggles, there has been a lot of concern from game to game with the team's somewhat up and down, fluctuating level of play. Would you say that you're concerned about various parts of this team, or do you think it's unfair to simply say most of this inconsistency can be boiled down to two things? One, they've had a lot of injuries to start the season, right? Precious, Shamet, and Mitch have not played yet this season. Those are 3 guys, at least 2 of those 3, 100%. Mitch we knew would be out, but Precious and Shamet, up until the last game of preseason, basically, they were parts of the rotation. You were expecting them to play, and obviously you lose them right on the eve of the season. I think that's a challenge. None of us have been super bullish on Jericho Sims. As definitely was not earlier to start the season, but he's given them something reasonable. Truly, I mean that genuinely. But yeah, so lack of depth, and your depth being depleted right at the start of the season, and then simply Mikal Bridges struggling to have anywhere near the impact you would expect him to have. I mean, is it fair just to boil it down to that? Because that's kind of where I'm at. I don't really have a concern that much about anything else, really.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, look, what this team boils down to at the end of the day is you're playing your 2 best players, right? Certainly your 2 best offensive players. I would say the 2 best players on the team.
I guess not every team can win games without their 2 best players on offense and defense, But I guess
their 2 best players on offense are all NBA level offensive players. I think if you look at just offense, both are top 10. I think Brunson still overall is fringe top 5, and Cat is overall still top 20. I mean, I've seen Sabonis ranked top 20. I don't think Sabonis gives you anything Cat doesn't at a much better level. I don't know if that's a hot take at this point, but I think Cat is just a much better version of Sabonis.
He's not even a version. He's just better than Sabonis. They're not even. He
shoots threes. He passes just as well. I think he's a better defender, but that's maybe splitting hairs. But anyway, you're building your team around two guys who are defensively challenged, right? I think they've both given a good effort. I'm not trying to rip them. That
I
is
think Brunson, especially these last few games, has been like really, really working on defense.
He's been working, but it's always going to be an issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think. I mean, I think he struggled in the playoffs last year defensively. I don't think it was a lack of effort. So you're building your team around two guys at two very important positions, point of attack and rim protector, that are defensive liabilities. So that is the bet that the Knicks have made, that we can make that happen. Can you? That is the question for this team and this season and going forward. They have answers. They have hypotheses for why that can work. One is named OG Anunoby, which it's very difficult to say that hasn't been anything but proven very much in the affirmative that they're right. He makes up for a lot of that. Another is Josh Hart, mixed, but he definitely helps you on the defensive glass. And then the other is Mikal Bridges. They get this super toolsy guy who's been on all first team, all defensive team. And that's why, the shooting doesn't worry me as much. If this hitch or whatever, this shot change motion really does mean he's a 31% 3-point shooter, that is a concern. I don't think we're there yet. But I think what worried us is that, that's fine. But we got you here because we have these two insane offensive superstars that need help on defense. That's what you're here for. And we can't just have you. I don't think Bridges has necessarily been bad. I think if you evaluate his defense, on a game-to-game basis, you would say, he's not great, but he needs to be great. And New Orleans, that was the first time, one of the few times this season where for 48 minutes you can say, that guy was great on defense. And, we both have our qualms with DeJounte Murray and his impact. Bridges was terrific. He did everything you want him to do. Can he do that for a whole season? I think what has given me some peace, even in some of the low moments after this trade, is that you traded for 4 picks plus another protected pick for this guy. You made a huge investment. You're bringing him to play with people he's very close with. Josh Hart's his best friend. He's very close with Brunson, college teammates, all that. And you're bringing him to play for Tom Thibodeau. This is not the kind of mistake. If the guy was just a culture fit and not a culture not fit, and he just isn't built like that to play hard, to play like Josh Hart or in that mold, this is not the kind of mistake this front office has made. Even a guy like Cam Reddish, where it didn't end up working out, he went to LA and he was a very good point of attack defender, a very good switchable defender. So guys who will buy in, guys who will do those things, I don't think this is a front office that makes those kind of mistakes. So I was still obviously optimistic on that. Is that enough? The other question is that enough to mitigate these things? And the other part of that, there's been there's been people who criticize Tibbs. I'm not going to criticize Tibbs. They're 12-8. That's fine for a new team. I'm not going to criticize them on the results. I'm not really going to criticize them on the process. But I think
the minute stuff. I think it's fair if people want to be critical of it. I'm a little bit more sympathetic to it because I think there's a lot of stuff he's trying to balance there. But yes, I
think there are stretches where wings are playing 14, 15 minutes in a row. I'm not saying you have to play Paco Mdadie. I am saying, and I'm not even saying you have to play Sims next to Cat, although I think that noise inside my head is getting a little bit louder because Sims has been really good. I think that's something it's worth trying at least to spare OG some minutes and trickle down to Mikal and Hart. When Precious comes back, I definitely think he needs to get some minutes next to Cat. You need to be playing Cat next to a rim protector for some amount of minutes. That'll mitigate the defensive issues as well as some of the minutes issues. But, that's what we're still finding out. Can you build a championship team where your two best players who are going to be playing 35, 40 minutes a night are defensive, below average, even when they're fully engaged? That's the question we're answering. That requires Mikal to be great. That requires some of Precious to be at the 4 or Sims or whoever, some minutes with Cat next to a rim protector. And maybe that still won't be enough. But we're still answering those questions. I think the one thing that if it was a no, if Mikal is not good enough to make that happen, that would be a serious problem for the Knicks. yesterday gives you some hope that it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of him being soft or whatever, um, you know, I'd be a lot more concerned about that if
some of
he
that is the Brooklyn stench. He hasn't played on a serious team in a couple of years. We saw that with Burks and Bogdanovic.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, you see this all the time with Ohio State guys, right? Where they like get drafted and it just takes them a while to.
Do you think
really...
Mikal Bridges would throw the flag away if somebody tried to plant the Nets flag on the Knicks court?
I think Mikal Bridges would definitely have like shoved an assistant. Like he probably would have done that.
It wasn't an assistant, by the way. You know what
it was? It was Jason Avant. It was Jason Avant.
Eagles and Michigan great Jason Avant. And he held on to it. And then I think they realized it was Jason Avant because no one fucked with him after. Like, all right, Joe, that's the guy who laid out. I forgot what team it was, but when Deshaun Jackson had that punt return, it was some team from New York, I think, that he laid out. He threw the main block. But yeah, that's off topic.
No, like in all seriousness, Ryan Day sucks. No, okay, all right. In all seriousness, Mikal Bridges, yeah, like I think what is hard, there's a lot of things to like work through, right? First of all, obviously he's playing like shit. And I don't think that's like he's not playing well, right? It's so that's its own thing that I think you'd be more apt to understand and be sympathetic to if you saw a higher level of engagement, of effort, of all those things, which have been at best, you could describe them as up and down, inconsistent. I would say there are games where it was fairly non-existent in terms of just the willingness to be physical, to fight for possessions, to do the little things like tag, like get it fighting through a screen, right? Like that's the one that everybody has noticed and talked about. So it's just fair to bring it up. Like you see that and you're like, this guy is soft. He's but then you have to reconcile this with like, okay, well, he's never missed a game in his career. I would imagine that no matter how impervious to injury is, that has come at some cost and required him to play through pain barriers and such. He is leading the league in minutes played, I believe, so far this year. At least minutes per game. I know he was going into yesterday's game. Maybe that changed since the Knicks were able to rest their starters for like the last fucking 15 minutes of the game. So it's like you're trying to reconcile like this visible lack of physicality with then other things that are like clearly he tries. I think he's also covering the most distance per game this year. So it's like it's not like he's not trying, even though at times you're watching him and you're like, where is that fight? Where is that, like, it's a contact sport. Fucking hit somebody. He's one of the lowest foul guys right now this year. Not just I'm not talking about drawing fouls. I'm talking about committing fouls. Obviously you're not encouraging guys to commit fouls, but not committing fouls is often a sign of like not playing with a physical force, right? Like how many times do we talk about you got to get into players and make them feel you, otherwise they get into a comfort zone, they get hot, blah 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 blah. And there's been too many of those moments this year. You also saw instances of him inexplicably just letting guys blow by him, and you're like, what the fuck's happening here? Like, so there's a lot of weird things reconciling there, or that you're trying to like get through, all while he's shooting like crap from three, especially in terms of from above the break, right? We know that he's really struggling with that. And then this sudden aversion to attacking the rim. And the reason why it was all so weird is like, even amidst the team's kind of up and down start, if you look at the first couple of games of the season, especially even that debacle in Boston on opening night, Mikal had like 3 or 4 nice drives in that game to the basket. Like really nice. And you're like, okay, like, we all watched the first half, we're like really concerned. And then you see the second half and it's like, all right, he's like making shots. We're okay. He's not broken. We're fine. But then it's just like, it has felt like it has slowly gotten worse. In particular for me, I would say offensively more than defensively. I actually will go as far as to say this. I thought starting with the Denver game on this road trip where the Knicks destroy the Nuggets, you have the Denver game, then you play Dallas, then you play Charlotte, and then obviously the Pelicans last. I actually thought you saw signs of him turning it around defensively. I thought he had more moments of fighting over screens, fighting through screens. I thought against Dallas, he got weirdly scapegoated, mostly because he did struggle again in terms of shooting the ball. But defensively, I didn't think he was the problem in that game. And honestly, I didn't think the Knicks played bad defense in that game. I stand by that. I think the Knicks played pretty average-ish defense, and Dallas just was hot. I mean, I don't know. Spencer Dinwiddie had like 7 of the most bullshit shots you'll ever see. I don't know what you're supposed to do with that. And so I was encouraged by that, even prior to the last night's game, where to me, clearly played the best defensive game of the season, probably. Maybe you want to say the Pacers game, second game of the season, but or the Detroit game. But I thought I thought yesterday was much better in a lot of the smaller details.
For him or for the team?
For him specifically.
Yeah, I was gonna say Denver, I think, was the best defensive team for the team, but
yeah, I think the team's defense last 4 games is encouraging, on top of Bridges' defense being encouraging. Anyway, but as this defensive improvement, again, as far as I see it, was slowly starting to occur, you have this, what felt like, really, like, even in the Denver game, right? The Knicks put up 145. If Mikal Bridges had like even a reasonable shooting performance, they probably put up like 160. Dallas is another game where it's like not attacking the rim, hesitant to shoot threes. And then it all cratered in that Charlotte game. And it was already cratering, but it was like you saw all these little micro things. So just really like a small example would be, as guys like OG or Cat or Brunson or whoever drive in, Mikal doesn't stay spaced on the perimeter. He'll cut in, and it's like, at times you can understand why you cut in, right? We see OG do that a lot, corner crash. It's not forbidden, and it's not always a terrible idea. But when you're doing it to the degree that he was doing it, it's a problem, because you need to be spaced. You need to be available at times and open up the floor that way. And he clearly was shooting and playing, or sorry, I should say playing without confidence in his own 3-point shot. Now, obviously, he turns that around yesterday in a big way, hit 7 threes. So hopefully, you hope that this is now the start of him going on a nice little run here from the 3-point line, getting back up to career averages. But it's, the Knicks can't be the best version of themselves offensively or defensively. Like, it's actually kind of fucking insane that they have the best offense in the league so far, with Mikal clearly playing well below expectations on that end of the floor so far. Speaks to the potency of what they have, and what they're getting from Brunson and Cat and Josh Hart and OG Anunoby, although he's they just can't hit a 3 the last 3 games either. And honestly, like, these guys deserve praise too. Campaign, Deuce, like, they're, what these guys are giving you offensively, it is showing in those numbers. But the fact that they're that good, even while Mikal Bridges is really struggling, or has struggled to date, it's encouraging. But it also needs to be understood that, like, there's still so much meat on the bone there. Like, they really might have a chance here to be a historic offensive team if he gets his shit together. And they need that, because, well, and we will talk about that, and we have talked about the defense. Clearly, that's the side of the ball where he's really, really just been awful so far to start this year. That's where you really need him to pick it up. But to me, I don't see the team's defensive ceiling is much higher than, like, I don't know, if they can get to, if they sniffed like top 10, that would be doing some real yeoman's work.
Is that because of Cat and Brunson?
It's because of Cat and Brunson. I think your depth means that guys have to, if you're going to play them more minutes, they're probably not going to be able to maintain defensive integrity at all times. I think you've seen that at times. You've seen that at times with both Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby very specifically. But, like, either way, on both ends of the floor, like, you're not going to hit your ceiling without Mikal Bridges playing up to the level that he has shown before in his career. And as much as it's fun to clown on, well, you just forgot how to play basketball in Brooklyn because they don't play serious basketball and they don't matter and they're not good, which is fair. Even like some of the metrics talking about like measuring point of attack defense and those things, those were good last year for Mikal Bridges. Like, they were good. And this year they have been awful. So I have a hard time believing, and yes, I do think that it's possible. The guy's never missed a game in his career. He's played a heavy minutes load throughout his career. I think it's possible that maybe he just can't play the type of minutes that perhaps Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks imagined when they made the trade. Maybe he's more of a 32, 33, 34 minute type of guy instead of a 38 minute a night guy. And that's okay, but then you just need to adjust to that. But like, he also has to do his end, and he has to hold up his end of the bargain of at least showing us and giving us games and stretches like he did yesterday. Like that's it. Like, I'm sorry, I don't really think there's that much else to discuss about this team and their struggles, because to me, most of the struggles are, like OG had a terrible game against Dallas, right? Awful, really awful. That's the type of game at some point you would want a Mikal Bridges to be able to make up for that and be the difference, right?
OG was still pretty good on defense. Like, that's never a question with him.
Yeah, honestly, even in that Dallas game, I thought defensively that was one of his weaker performances. He had like weird things where he kept slipping, and I don't know. He was just at a very clumsy, weird game that night.
Like there was the one where he got attacked on the closeout.
Yeah,
I think that was a wet spot on the floor. But
he was just fucking slipping and sliding the entire night. But the point is, like, at times, like, you wanted to be because God knows how many games so far this year would you have said other guys have stepped up and covered for Mikal Bridges playing poorly. And that's ultimately the standard. Like, he's not Deuce McBride. Okay. Like, Deuce McBride, we love Deuce McBride, but Deuce McBride is obviously held to a lower expectation and standard of consistency in his performances than Brunson, than Karl-Anthony Towns, than OG Anunoby, than Josh Hart, and obviously then Mikal Bridges. Like, we know this. Campaign, same deal, right? Like, we don't hold these guys to the same standard because they're not supposed to necessarily be your most consistent and your most impactful players. Mikal Bridges is supposed to be at worst our fourth most impactful guy. And you would say, I don't even think without hesitation, of the main rotation players, he's been the most detrimental so far this year, maybe aside from Jericho Sims, who, again, we clearly do not hold to the same standard.
I mean, Jericho Sims has done everything you asked. You can ask him from this year.
That's what I agree with you. So it's like, but that's the only other guy you could potentially kind of lump into that group. So yeah, like, it is about Mikal Bridges to me, and the rest of it is a lot of fucking noise. Like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. I don't think, like, well, when Precious comes back, we need to think about changing the starting lineup or, doing this thing or changing that rotation. No, we need Mikal Bridges to simply play better. And if he plays better, I also think you would see less of a minutes load for certain guys. Like we saw last night, when the game's out of hand, Tibbs is more than happy to cut these guys minutes. But you've got to
the league is good right now, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to get a whole lot of games against teams like that.
Of course, but he also needs to have trust in, like, OG Anunoby is playing a lot. You want to know why OG Anunoby is playing a lot? Because he doesn't trust Mikal in his minutes, and he shouldn't. So, like, he's using OG to kind of buoy some of those minutes, or Josh Hart, or Cat, or Jalen Brunson, or whatever. He's effectively upping those guys' minutes because Mikal is not showing that he can buoy anybody right now, or hasn't until yesterday. Again, yesterday was fantastic. You need more games like that. He needs to provide more games like that consistently. And he needs to, quite frankly, you pay the price we paid for him. He needs to be able to match up against elite players. He needs to be able, in those matchups, to at least play them to a draw, right? On certain nights, or win them on certain nights. Like, it's not, this is a guy a couple years ago went into Boston and absolutely destroyed Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown when he was on the Nets. It happened. Like, it was a real thing that happened. And I have a hard time. So, like, how concerned am I? I'm concerned because he's not playing well, or wasn't, I guess, until yesterday. So you're concerned until you see it consistently night to night. But in terms of, like, my logical, just kind of like, I kind of fall where you are, and look, we both root for NFL teams that had significant amounts of change last year in both the Eagles and Bills. I think one thing that's a good takeaway from that is, hey, if you believe in your general man, if you're the management structure of your team and they've earned that trust because of their body of work, you should probably bet on them figuring shit out in the long run. And that's kind of where I am on the Bridges thing, where I am concerned. But the fact that he's only 27, 28 years old, he's never had a major injury. He's been productive in his career up until basically just now. And the fact that this front office has every other one of their major moves has reaped dividends. I think the smart money is on it does get turned around. He's not broken. He's not going to stay, one of the worst above the break volume shooters in the league. He's not going to never attack the rim again. He's not going to play with zero force on defense. To me, he looked like he was lacking confidence. And as he, with his three ball specifically, but then it started seeping into the rest of his game and he just kept sinking and sinking and sinking. And now I think hopefully last night was a sign of things to come. I think you'll start to see a turnaround from him. I think these next 20 games will be a hell of a lot better than his first 20 were in a Knicks jersey.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I think that the kind of mistakes the Knicks front office has made mistakes. If the thing was that Mikal Bridges can't play, if he's slow or if he's athletically diminished, or the shooting thing is some big deal, that's one thing that I could see as being an issue, right? But the mistakes they've made have generally not been a guy just doesn't fit in terms of playing tough. You can say a lot of things about Cam Reddish. He wasn't soft on the Knicks. He's been called that other times in his career. He played hard. I don't think he fit with the team. There was a lot of ways in terms of in the offense and doing his job and all of that. But I don't think effort was ever an issue. I don't think playing hard was as much of an issue as it had been from him the rest of his career. A guy like Kemba was athletically diminished. A guy like Fournier was athletically diminished. Those are not if the biggest thing with Bridges is he's not playing as hard as you would like on defense, given that you have Tom Thibodeau, given that you have his best friends on the team, and given that you have a front office that doesn't usually, that seems to be the first thing they look at with these guys, maybe to a detriment at times, right? Maybe there's guys that are more athletically gifted they should have bought in on, that they picked guys like, that maybe they, were more of a culture fit. But I think they've prioritized that. Look at everyone they've drafted, right? Quickly was a guy that a lot of other teams didn't look at. Big time culture fit. Obi was a culture fit, right? Guys that play hard, that are team first. They worry about getting better every day, right? That whole 2021 draft, right? I am disgusted with what's happened with Grimes in Dallas, but he's playing well. And frankly, the things that were his issues were not the things that he still, even his work stays, he played hard on defense, right? He did the little things, right?
He's playing well because he's going back to what made him good for the Knicks in the first place, instead of crying about not getting touches and the ball feeling like it's 100 pounds.
And we can also, everyone on all sides, this is on a kind of tangent here. I've seen people now be like, oh, Tibbs didn't use them the right way. No, I think he was in his third year. He was a young player that had a lot of success with the Knicks. And his spot was threatened, and he reacted the way a lot of young players do. And he's grown from that experience. It wasn't immediate, right? He didn't blow up for him, and Detroit was willing to let him go. And he's now, matured. And we saw the same thing happen with Porzingis when he left. Everyone was like, it was the Knicks' fault. And now he's become a great player. And he doesn't blame the Knicks. I don't think anyone blames the Knicks. It was a young player, a good player, who developed some maturity, right? And I think that probably is what happened with Grimes. But my point is, if this was the downside of Bridges, right, that the guy just isn't willing to put in the work needed from a top end defensive option, just doesn't play with enough force, that's not the kind of mistakes they've made, and that's not the kind of failure mode that you've seen from Tom Thibodeau, right? If it did happen, it would be a disaster, and it'd probably mean Tibbs would move on from him, and that might still happen, right? But I think there's a lot of reason to have hope that the environment he's in is going to give you that. For me, the question still is, right? I still think there's that question of, can this work? Can it work with a poor defender at point guard and a poor defender at center, especially center, because of Tibbs and just the general, the teams that they're going to have to beat, right? Boston, right? Al Horford is not some imposing rim protector. He's a pretty good defender. Porzingis they have rim protectors. There are no liabilities on defense for them. Cleveland, right? 2 great rim protectors. A little weak on the wing, but they've shored that up as much as you can hope, right? Garland and Mitchell are not great, but again, that's really their only defensive weakness, and they've proven that they can make that work. They had the top-rated defensive team, even when the Knicks played them, and in that series, frankly, they don't lose because of defense. You talk about the offensive rebounding and all that, but the Knicks played better defense than them, but the Cavs, did as well as anyone did that year on the Knicks on defense, better than Miami. And that was with a full Knicks roster. So, but I still think this experiment, can you make Cat and Brunson work, is an interesting question. You just can't separate it from, in order to answer that question, though, you have to have Bridges at his max. We can answer that question if Bridges plays like an awesome defender, if Sims and Precious provide depth, and at times they're used properly next to Cat strategically to give you some rim protection, to steal some minutes. If Hart hits then we can start to talk about that, but we can't even get to that question. But I think that is the ultimate question with this team. They've made this bet. This is the final mode, right? Brunson and Cat. That's the big question. But to your point, the most immediate question is still Bridges, right? He is the guy that gets you to the point where you can answer that question. If you can't answer the question, then that would be the biggest waste of all, because that means we didn't even really get to the final boss. So,
yeah. And look, it's hard not to get wound up with some of the stuff that we were seeing from him, because we're all aware of what was paid to go get him. Obviously, once you sink that type of capital into a player, they basically have to work out. Otherwise, you have to find really search and claw for value elsewhere to make up for it. Obviously, look, the Knicks have a good team, so they have that, but this is a team that basically has played 7.5 guys deep for large parts of the season so far. We're talking about, if we get Precious back and we get Shamit back in the rotation, you can go 9 deep or whatever, but that depth that they've had, the quality of depth and the quantity of depth that they've had over the last couple of years, which has really been their strength in a lot of ways, has been tested and it's been limited and it's been drained to assemble this roster. They need time to replenish that depth. You see this with Cleveland. I know they had a really weird season last year. They had a lot of injuries. It felt like their top 4 guys never played together. But after kind of dealing with issues of depth in that first year together after the Donovan Mitchell trade, they were able to add Max Strus, right? And George Niang. And then it's this year, it's all right, well, we got Ty Jerome, who randomly is shooting fucking flamethrowers out of his asshole now. And okay, Dean Wade is back and whatever. You have more options because you have had time to use your various cap exceptions and limited trade assets to find the right pieces. I mean, look, a team that we just lost to, Dallas, right? A couple years ago, they make the Kyrie trade, and you're like, man, those top 2 are really good, but how are they going to build up the depth of this team? And now you're looking at them, and it's like, look, they didn't have Clay when we played them. They didn't have, but think about it, they have Clay now, right? That's a guy they have. They didn't have
Quinn Grimes.
Yeah, they added Grimes. They added Klay Thompson. They've added Najee Marshall. They've added, obviously they drafted Derek Lively. They've added Daniel Gafford. They have added pieces. And in the last couple of years, obviously going to the Western or the championship, the finals last year after winning the Western Conference, it takes time. It takes time, and you've got to let this team, this front office, manage that. In the meantime, it's okay, I think, for fans to be concerned about what we were seeing from Bridges through the first 20 games and be concerned because of the cost and all of that. Where I just didn't really understand it was like, this team is soft. They're not trying. They don't compete the same way. But it's like I just don't see that. Like I don't watch this
You
team.
know, this is a Ryan Day team.
No, this is definitely not a Ryan Day team. One thing I would say about Tom Thibodeau is he's certainly not Ryan Day. But like, I just think they deserve the benefit of the doubt more than we at times, myself included, can react, because they do, like Tibbs said, like they have a body of work. Like Jalen Brunson has a body of work. Josh Hart has a body of work in New York, especially. Like Karl-Anthony Towns has a body of work. Like these are guys that have bodies of work that show, hey, they're good NBA players to varying degrees, obviously, but they're all very, very good NBA players. And Mikal Bridges, obviously the new guy in a lot of ways, he has a body of work too. It just, he has not really showed that to date. But, you know, I don't know.
This is, I believe he's the only player on the team who's played in NBA Finals. That matters. And he was an all
campaign did.
Yeah. By the way, I for a guy I probably shit on a lot on this pod during last year's playoffs, I'm happy to have that guy on the team. But yeah, you know, he has a body of work, and it look, I've been saying this. It happened with Hartenstein was hurt. We don't know if Bridges is or whatever, but Hartenstein took half a season pretty much. Where there were times where you or I were like, should we? I'm sure we have mentioned at some point, should we be playing Jericho Sims at some point?
I know, I 100% was advocating for it at a certain point.
Yeah, and now look at it, right? Now
Jericho Sims is better than him, right?
Yeah, fuck fart and shit. But the point is, right? It obviously changed. Now, the good retort to that, a very fair retort to that, would be we paid 2 years, $8 million a year for Isaiah Hartenstein. Paid a little bit more than that for Mikal Bridges on salary alone.
But this is where the conversation, and I get why rival fans or media people will constantly talk about the cost of the deal, right? Like I get that. I would do this.
Wouldn't you? If yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I would do that. Like I did the same thing, right? With Rudy. Like, so I get that. I'm fine with them doing that. Other teams' fans, you know, trolling, whatever. That's all fine and good. It's all in the game. Cool, great. What I just get annoyed about is like, dude, I don't need when I hear from Knicks fans constantly, it's like, dude, it's over. Like the fucking price is paid out the door. We all know what he cost. We all know it. So we don't need to like preface every conversation with him with like, oh my God, I can't believe we sunk the franchise. Like it's, you can just express the concerns about him and not hit me over the head, fucking hammer every single time that, oh my God, we gave up 4 unprotected first round picks and a Milwaukee pick and a pick swap. It's like, I get that.
And Bojan Bogdanovic.
Yeah. And Bojan Bogdanovic. Like I understand that. I don't need to hear about it every 5 seconds. Also, that Milwaukee pick maybe is not going to be a lottery pick like people were thinking and worried about at the start of the season. So like, it just like we can, I think there's valid concerns being expressed by Mikal Bridges. I do not need to hear every fucking time the guy struggles, all the picks went out the door. Oh my God. Had to get the last Villanova guy. Can't believe Leon Rose ruined the franchise. Like, I would bet money right now. I'd bet money. I'd take anybody's action on it that Leon Rose will have proven to be correct in dealing for Mikal Bridges when all is said and done over his time in New York. And it's
even if it's an overpay, right? I mean, I think everyone will say that the Nets made out well on that trade.
The Nets did fine. They did exactly what they needed to do. They got draft capital. They were able to erase the picks they had going out the door as part of it.
The other opportunity is, the other question is there something better the Knicks could have done, right? I mean, I think an interesting question, if Bridges hits his max, right? If Bridges hits everything you'd hope for, would the Knicks have been better off giving 4 first-round picks for Donovan Mitchell, right? Or would the Knicks have, if they had given up this trade, but instead of Bogdanovic, if they had given up 2 years ago Grimes with it, who they ended up trading.
Here's where I would just.
I think that's still an interesting question to me, by the way, because I don't know that Mitchell would fit as well. But go ahead.
I don't think it would. I think
as like Bridges fully realized, he's not giving you that on defense. Like right now, I'm not saying he's better than Donovan Mitchell. What I'm saying is on this team, if Bridges the vision hits, he still wouldn't be as good as Donovan Mitchell, but that might be a better fit. But
Well, you also wouldn't have gotten Josh Hart.
Huh?
Because they got the 20, they sent out their 2023 pick. That's the pick we used to get Josh Hart. What I would say is that I don't like this is where it's complex.
I mean, you could have used a different pick, right? You can use 2025 or something.
Yeah, but all of those were out the door for Donovan Mitchell. They're all going to be out the door for Donovan Mitchell. That was the whole trade. Like the trade was all the picks.
So you wouldn't have been able to get a Josh Hart.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have gotten OG because they wanted quickly. They wanted RJ. They wanted all. So it's like that's.
If you had 4 picks and you just did Grimes and RJ, maybe that would have worked, right?
Maybe, I mean, maybe I don't know, but maybe then you still maybe.
I mean, this was a very high cost. So
yeah,
could you have put it to get to Lowry marketing? Are there other guys? You have to look at the opportunity cost part of it. I'm not even saying that invalidates it because if Bridges at his fully realized again, probably is a better fit for this team than Mitchell. Quite possibly is a better fit than a guy like Lowry or Tari Eason or some of these other guys. But that is the other thing it's being weighed against, right? Like what else could they have done with that capital?
So that's fair. What I think is weird about the whole discussion, not weird in the sense of it's weird to have the conversation. I think it's weird because you have to kind of go back to that moment in time when they're making the trade and there's concern about, okay, are we going to be able to keep Isaiah Hartenstein? Well, obviously they weren't able to do that. Right. So I think they probably had an idea of like, there's a chance we could lose this guy.
Do you think they already had the Cat trade? Like we know this is going to happen at that point?
I'm pretty confident
Yeah.
I think they were going to do the Cat trade whether Hartenstein came back or not. That's what I think. I think they wanted Cat.
Mitch is gone. That's what it means, basically.
Well, it's not even just that. I just think it's like they wanted Cat. Like I think that's clear. I think they've wanted Cat. I think it became a point where they knew there was a price they could get him at that made sense for them to get him at that price versus like some of the stuff like a couple of years ago. Maybe if you trade for Cat, you probably have to give up a lot more. But that changes because of his new contract and Minnesota's cap situation and their ownership struggle and whatever. Circumstances change. It changes the price. Now this is a player who you have coveted and valued, but at a different price point than what it was previously. Now it's matching up. So like, you do the Bridges trade. I would guess part of the calculus of doing this Bridges trade is like, hey, if Hartenstein bounces, we don't really like, there's no center that we can get that all these picks, like, I don't know what center we're going to get here that we can even trade for. That's worth it. Like you can go down and do the exercise, go look at like the elite centers that you would say like, yeah, like I guess that's the one guy. And even then, like, do I think the vision of like the best of Jakob Poeltl is that as impactful as the best version of Mikal Bridges? Probably not. I don't think probably not, definitely not. But I think you have to go back to that and you have to really put yourself in like the overall situation where you're like, all right, well, if we lose Hartenstein, and at that point, they probably already know Mitch is going to be out for an extended period of time. I think that might have already been reported then too. Then you're like, all right, well, we have like Randall and then we have Precious and Sims. Like that's our center rotation right now. Sure. I guess we drafted Ariel Hukporti. Like, so sure. Like if you want to include him in the numbers there, cool. But like, this is like, how are we going to maintain defensive integrity? And I think the idea of like, all right, well, if we're going to do the Cat thing, which I think like, maybe they didn't know the exact parameters of the trade, but I do think I would bet that they had a strong feeling by that point that they could get that done, that would get done at some point in the offseason. At that point, you're like, how can we ensure that we're giving ourselves the best chance to compete? And in that vein, like protect ourselves defensively. And Mikal Bridges is a pretty solid bet there. Like in terms of, I mean, I'll be cards on the table. I wouldn't have done the trade. I would not have done the Mikal Bridges trade. Just flat out like that. That would never have been the guy I put in all the picks for. That was, and I'm fundamentally against these all-in trades. I think they're super risky. Their track record has not been great. I don't love it. So I'm on record with that. I would also, again, as I've already said, like, I think I would bet on Leon Rose, his decision making over mine. So
Me
either
too.
way, not a hot take there. But like I don't know, like I don't know. It's a fair conversation now because it's like, all right, well, now you're looking at it and you're like, well, would we be better off if we had, maybe you can trade 2 of these first round picks and you can get Tari Eason and Jabari Smith or something, or like, is that better? I don't know. It's possible, but I also think like we're judging this 20 games in. Again, understand why like fans of other teams and media people will do that. They should do that. But like, now obviously when it's your team, you kind of always think about it more rationally than you would anybody else. And obviously you're going to be a little bit more optimistic than other people are. But like, it's 20 games in. We basically have seen the worst version of Mikal Bridges that you could have imagined. And within that, we're still, again, the best offense in the league. We have the 6th best net rating. We are number 1, or we're number 2 in true shooting percentage. We're number 2 in effective field goal percentage. We're 5th in defensive rebound percentage. The defense has slightly ticked up now to, I think, 21st or 22nd in the league, depending on the source you look at. Like, it feels really bad for whatever reason. I think because, like, you can't win the championship in October and November and December, right? So, like, is this team right now, if you put them in a championship series against Boston, an Eastern Conference, like if you're playing the Eastern Conference Finals today, you're playing Boston. Do I think they would have a chance in hell beating Boston? No, I don't.
Cleveland?
I don't. Yeah, I think maybe you could beat. I think you could beat Cleveland. I still
OKC, Dallas. I don't. I think those are the 4 teams that.
I'm not worried about Cleveland. I'm sorry. I just don't. I don't care about this regular season stuff.
You're getting too cocky over never losing to teams from Ohio. I see.
Yeah. No, I
not
just
worried about Cincinnati either.
I do not trust a team where your starting lineup is inherently like it does not work in the playoffs. I'm sorry. Like, it's cool that Evan Mobley's playing better. Genuinely, like, he's playing a lot better. It's cool that they're getting all this production from all these guys. Your starting lineup does not make sense. It means that somebody's getting benched. It's going to be Jared Allen, and that is always just a weird thing to me. So I will continue to just bet on the Knicks being able to beat Cleveland. I could be wrong. I don't think it matters. Either way, the point is, I don't think the Knicks could win those series right now. But you're not playing for the championship right now. You will not be playing for the championship. You will not be playing a postseason game until fucking April. And if last year at this time I had told you the Knicks are a contender, you would have said you're a fucking idiot. And I would have said I'm a fucking idiot because I did not think they were a contender.
That was pre-OG trade.
Right. But that's the point, is moves are there to be made, and this team still needs time to develop. Like, you are still, like, depth matters. Like, depth getting through a regular season especially matters. That's where Cleveland has their strongest advantage right now. Their depth is in place, and it's been in place, and it's good. The only guy they've really missed all year is Strus. But they have options now where they don't need Strus desperately. Like, the Knicks don't have that. And while they also don't have this depth, you're trying to incorporate a totally different type of center than you've had over the last 4 years in the Tom Thibodeau, Leon Rose era. A center who is not a good rim protector, who is not good in drop coverage as the base scheme, who is a significantly much more dynamic, impactful, higher usage offensive player than anything they've had at that position before. Like, that is a massive shift in how you then need to change things around. You are talking about a guy in Mikal Bridges who, for the last year and a half, was effectively playing as like a number 1, number 2 type of option. And you are now going from that to, like, you are at best 3rd in the pecking order. 3rd or 4th best in the pecking order. And guess what? When you're the 3rd or 4th guy in the pecking order, do you know what you need to do to be worthwhile as a championship 3rd or 4th option?
Watch Josh Hart videotape and do that.
Yeah, do that. But play really good defense. Win stuff on the margins. Give good effort. Like, it is different. It is different. Like, you don't get to take possessions off defensively because you're necessary to maintain defensive integrity. You don't get to hang out on the worst or the second worst or even the 3rd worst offensive player on the other team. No, you are guarding a top 2 option. And that is different. That
You're the guy that makes it happen. You don't do your job. You're not here to
Yeah.
do your job. You're here to do something at a great level, a high level.
Yes, but what he's being asked to do is also very different from what he's been asked to do the last couple of years. That requires time to get used to. And like there is fundamental, like I will continue to say this because I believe this to be true. You see this in a ton of sports. He knows the price tag that was paid for him. He knows it. There is that pressure there that hangs over all of it. I think you can see that in his play at times where he's playing to not make mistakes rather than playing freely, and playing without, I don't want to say fear, but playing without
just focus, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
just play the game. Like he's
yeah.
not. He's like, yesterday was the first time watching him where it felt like he was just playing like for a long time. Where it just felt like he's just playing the game. It was not overthinking. It was not a lot of hesitation. It's just quick, decisive decisions on both ends of the floor, and that's what they need. That's how he has to play. That's how Josh Hart. That's like what he does, right? He just plays the fucking game, and that doesn't mean you're not thinking. It doesn't mean that you don't pay attention to detail, but it cannot cloud your judgments. It can't be so debilitating that it slows you down and that you start playing mechanically like a robot. And that is ultimately the struggle for him this year, and not being weighed down by, hey, you were brought here to be like a finishing piece. You were brought here to end this championship drought. You are the biggest acquisition in Knicks history in terms of simply the assets out the door. There's no question about it. He is the biggest acquisition in Knicks history, in franchise history, for a market that is brutal, right? I mean, it is brutal. The New York market is brutal to live up to the media pressure. And like, he might have thought he understood the New York market playing over in that pygmy thing over in Brooklyn. But they're not even a real family over there. Yeah, these guys don't even prick their hands. Not even doing it. It's either
Cam Thomas is Butch.
Cam Thomas. No, Cam Thomas is Fat Dom. But like it's not the same thing. And to be fair, like, Cat has played at Kentucky, right? Like, he's played in something relevant, and Cat's experience as a player throughout his career is just so different, right? This is a
He's
guy.
also a lot. He's older, right? Or
He's the same age.
he's not that much older, but he came in at 18 or 19,
Well,
right? Bridges came in much later.
Well,
so.
It's the difference of, like, Cat was the number 1 pick. Cat's been the face of a franchise. Cat's been in the national media discourse in a very different way than Mikal Bridges ever was prior to coming to the Knicks. Prior to coming to the Knicks, people that talked about Mikal Bridges constantly, all the time, they didn't even fucking watch him. Like, I guarantee you half the people that are, like, being super critical of Mikal Bridges now are only doing it because they're now watching him play, and they're like, oh, well, he's not doing this thing well, he's not doing that well. It's like, Mikal Bridges has never played under this type of scrutiny, ever. Not at Villanova, which, yes, they won championships and they were a great team. It is not Kentucky. It is not the pressure of being the number 1 pick. It is not playing in New York City for the Knicks. It is not any of those things. It's not close. Then he plays for the Suns, and I know they went to the finals, but it's the fucking Suns, man. And it was it's like this weird COVID year stuff. Like, I'm not even trying to downplay what he did. I'm just saying, like, the media scrutiny. I mean, we talked about this with Julius, right? Where it was like, he has this great 2020-21 season, but then 21-22, and everybody's back in the stadiums, and it's business as usual in terms of how the game is covered, media in the locker room, all those type of things. He had a really bad down year, and we're like, was last year the fluke in all these different ways? Was it easier for him mentally to stay focused and blah, 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 blah? And that applies to Bridges too, I think. I think it's fair to at least consider that. And again, Phoenix is just not New York. And at the time, he did not have the pressure of, like, biggest acquisition in a franchise's history, playing in New York City. You're not supposed to come in and be the difference necessarily. Like, right, it's Chris Paul, it's Devin Booker, it's DeAndre Ayton on that team. He was still the number 1 pick, right? Like, it is not that. Then you go to Brooklyn, and there's no fucking pressure there. There's no pressure there. Like, you got traded for Kevin Durant. Everybody understands you're not Kevin Durant. You can put up fucking 20.
You're in kind of a little brother franchise, so
Yeah. And you can, and if you put up your 22 points or whatever, people are just going to be like, man, Mikal Bridges, he's balling. They're not going to watch it. They're not really holding you to star standards there. And he wasn't.
And they're not holding you to winning standards, right? We don't want him to be a star. It's kind of,
well, we want him to be a star. We want him to be a star in the way that we need him to be on this team. Like the way that Derek White is, right? Like the way that Derek White is really, really good for the Celtics. That's really what you need from Mikal Bridges, and what I would assume they somewhat envisioned when they're getting Mikal Bridges is a similar effect. And obviously they're not the same player. They don't do the same things, but the idea of this guy can make us a contender, even though he's not going to average 22 points a game and
defender who is a jack of all trades on offense.
Yeah. And that is his challenge. That is his burden to bear. Can he do it? I don't know. I mean, there's no way to know until we just play it out. And again, we're only 20 games. We're 20 games in. We're a quarter of the way through the season. I understand the rush to want to determine what this team's ceiling and upside and did we fuck up, and I get all that. But I'll give you an example. Like, here's an example for and Stacy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I know I'm not wrong. If you told me 6 weeks ago the Bills were a championship contender, I'd have been like, you're fucking bananas. If I told you 6 weeks ago the Eagles are a championship contender, you would have told me I was fucking crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think your team lost in the AFC Championship.
The second,
the Eagles. Oh, I'm sorry, to the Super Bowl champions by 3 points. The Eagles lost by 45 in like 5 games in a row to choke. But anyway, point taken.
Yeah, but like the point is, like, now all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, the Bills they're a contender. Wow, they can actually do it this year. I think the Eagles are a contender.
What a surprise! They have the best quarterback in the game. Yeah. They're contender. Who would have thought that?
And you rightfully, I'm assuming, believe the Eagles are a contender now. And the point is not to, sit around and to quote the Wolf, suck our own dicks, but it is to point out, like, these things don't just happen overnight. They are not just linear. You don't just, again, you don't win the championship right now. It is extremely possible for this team to show signs that are concerning in the first 20 games, and maybe the next 20 games get better. And then maybe the next 20 games get better. And then maybe the next 20 games get better. And by the end of the season, we're like, you know what? They weren't a contender in November or early December. But now this version of this team is a contender. And I'm not closing the book on that yet. My gut is that they're not really a contender this year, but I believe fully that they will be a contender in the next 3 years moving forward. And I get why that is so annoying to say and frustrating for fans, because we're all dying for the Knicks win a championship, right? Like, we're dying to have that opportunity.
Would you rather see the Knicks win a championship or the Bills win a Super Bowl?
The Knicks win a championship, but
because you're on a Knicks pod.
Yes, exactly. But no, like, it's frustrating to take the long view when the price is paid out the door, right, for all these pieces. But it is also important to remember, like, the Knicks did not assemble. This is not like they put together. This isn't like when the Rockets back in the day, right? They traded for Charles Barkley and Scottie Pippen, and they were like, this was the last hurrah. Like, we're just going for it here. Like, this is a team that has a window of years, of 3 or 4 years. This team should be together, all these guys in their prime. And within those years, you have opportunities now, after the season, or maybe even at the deadline this year, to add more consequential depth pieces. And that can change the picture, which is what I imagine happening. So I get the frustrations, and I understand how a lot of it will be laid on Mikal Bridges' door, but I don't think the book is closed on him, and I don't think the book is closed on this team's window or something, even if they come up short this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I said, like, I think ultimately my answer is the same as yours. I don't think this is a contender. I mean, let me ask you this: when's the last time a team put out 2 below average defenders in their starting lineup and won a championship?
The Nuggets.
Do you consider Jokic a below average defender?
Yes. I mean, I get that he's like a really great defensive rebounder and there's value to that and blah, blah, blah. And he's cool at doing steals and kicking the ball and all this shit, but he's a bad defender.
Do you think he's as bad a defender as Cat?
I think he's slightly better, but I think he's bad. And I
think there's a substantial difference, but maybe that could be just me. But
I don't think there's a huge difference in them defensively. And I think Cat's actually he's like really good at specific things. Like it's a lot about coverages.
Jokic is always in the right place, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, but I don't think Cat's actually often in the wrong place. I think he's mostly in the right place. He just like Jokic, he can be at the rim, and you're like, yeah, I'm still getting a layup, buddy. Still finishing this over you, pal. Don't care that you're 7 feet tall. Your 7 feet is not Mitchell Robinson 7 feet, right? Like these guys are different level rim protectors.
But it is rare. Right.
But yeah, it is rare. But the path that the Nuggets took, their pathway was what? Okay,
a point guard and a center who are both bad at defense. Yeah.
Forget the specifics of it. But the overall picture was okay, let's get to average on defense. Let's be average defensively.
Do you know I'll look it up, but do you know they finished off the top of your head? Or?
Pretty sure they finished 15th. So basically average defensively. And then let's just be the best offense in the league. The Knicks have that path. There is that path for them. Like, is it the ideal path that you want to take? No. But do like, are there really ideal paths to winning a championship? We talk about this all the fucking time. But like, winning championships is hard. You need outliers usually to win championships. You need to take risks, real risks, which the Knicks have now took. And you got to push your chips in and blah, 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 blah. Right? A lot of things need to align to win a championship. Shit.
Yeah, you either need a generational player, right? So who has won the championships in the last 40 years, right? Either you have Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Shaq, MJ, Duncan,
Steph.
or Curry. Yeah, LeBron. Curry. Or I forgot LeBron. But you have one of those. Those are all generational players, right?
Dirk.
The teams I wouldn't call. He's really good. But I would consider that team one of the teams that needed a lot to go right for it. Just kind of my point to your point, right? If you don't, and I don't think we have a generational player. I love Brunson and Cat. I think they might end up in the top 100 players of all time. I do not think they will end up in the top 25. So you need a lot of things to go right, no matter what, right? So I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, and it's not just being good; it's also being lucky. Like, look at the last 3 championship teams. How much injury luck have they had? I mean, and look, I take it Boston last year was pretty clearly, decisively the best team in the league, and they had injuries to deal with of their own, right? Porzingis basically missed the entire playoffs. But you look at how many things broke right for them.
Well, even getting to play Indiana instead of the team they should have been playing.
Miami gets hurt. They have injuries in the first round. Fucking Cleveland's entire team basically falls off a cliff in the second round. Indiana had their own injuries. I mean, I guess,
and they got Indiana because our team died. So
yeah, right. And so like you have things that fall in your favor. Like look at the Nuggets, right? Their path to the championship was fairly easy. Look at the Bucks when they won a championship. Look at you can look at injury.
I mean, the Raptors don't have a championship if Durant and Klay don't get hurt, right? So
yeah, so like injury luck is the most dismissed thing, but it is a real thing. So like a lot of things need to fall in place. If they don't all fall in place this year, like I think the thing for fans is it's easy, and we're all guilty of this. I'm guilty of this too, right? Like when Cleveland did the Donovan Mitchell trade, I was like, oh, well, their window's probably shut and they probably can't win a championship because they lost to the Knicks in the first round in a gentleman's sweep in that first year. I was like, see, it's never going to work. Stupid trade, awful stuff. Let's go. Like, don't need to worry about them forever. And now, like, while I still don't fully trust them, and I do think that by the end of the season, the Knicks would be in position and shape to beat them in a series. Like, I think their window is open, obviously. Like, it might require that you trade Jared Allen and fully lean into the Mobley thing, but you're not looking at them now, right? Are you looking at them now and like, I have no idea how they can get there? No. But it took them a couple of years, right? It took them a couple of years of taking their lumps, figuring out how to add some pieces, and now they're back in the mix. I don't know if Phoenix is a contender this year. Like, their injuries are such a weird thing, and their center rotation is awful. But they were successfully added some better depth pieces, and now when they're healthy, their team looks a lot better than it did last year, right? Where you were just like, okay, KD and Booker can do a lot of cool shit, but now you have a serious coach, and now you have guys other than KD and Booker. It looks better. Like it can just kind of happen on its own. I mean, I'll give you. I thought a couple years ago. So after the 2020-21 season, right? Boston actually finished with a worse record than us that year. They had the Kemba thing. They had, you know, their roster was really expensive. It didn't really make sense. Ainge bounces. Stevens takes over. The first trade that they make is dumping Kemba and getting back Al Horford, who you were like, this guy was washed in Philly. Like, what's happening here? They start the next year, and they're 500 after RJ hits his famous banked-in game winner. And then what happens? They kind of find something, get some consistency, trade for Derek White at the deadline, and boom, they're in the NBA Finals. Like, it can change like that. It can click like that.
Still, I see no changes. All I see is racist faces.
Well, we're gonna see one in the White House soon enough, maybe a couple even. But like the thing, what would concern me more is if the Knicks had the same exact record, but they were like a +2, +1 type net rating. Like, what gives me a lot of hope with this team is, sure, I understand that the lows when they play poorly are very annoying and frustrating. A lot of those games to me look like a team that's still figuring out how to play cohesively as a group together. But when you see them clicking, right? When it's clicking, they're not just beating teams. Look at the fucking amount of blowouts we've had already this year. Like you mentioned,
so that would be the other concern, though, right? It's like, this is not a team that has been great in close games, and it seems like I mean, is it fair to say, well, look, yeah, their net rating is great, but they've lost a lot of close games to teams they shouldn't lose to, and it's boosted by just beating the shit out of New Orleans and Detroit, who are not good teams, right?
But they beat the shit out of Denver.
Is this kind of like, you know, Ken Pom or whatever in college basketball, and like Gonzaga just wins by 80 points against all these shitty teams, and then they have to play UConn or something, and it doesn't match up the same way.
I think, but neither of us. I think that would be accurate if both of us were saying they're already contenders right now, right? But I'm not. I don't feel that. But what I do feel is the ceiling of this team is still enormous. Like, there is clearly a path for this team, in my opinion, to be a contender. Some of that has to do with giving the front office time to get better depth pieces in, settle the rotation, get healthy, all that stuff. Some of it is just about playing together and finding that consistency. Like, it's pretty normal for a team with as many moving parts as this to struggle in tight games early in the season. It's what you want to see are those moments where when things are clicking and it's, oh, wow, they just fucking destroy the team. I mean, and they have blown out some good teams, right? Like, they blew out Denver in Denver. Like, that's a pretty significant win. I mean, I imagine that will probably be the worst loss Denver has at home all season. I don't even think it'll be close. And like, so you've seen that already. Like, you've seen them put together halves, quarters, whatever, of dominance against teams. And that is pretty significant. I think it's easy to focus too much on the negative because it's always easier to be negative. It's always easier to like tear anything down, right, than see the kind of upside in something. But you do see that upside. Like, I really don't know how you could have watched the Knicks all year. I'm not saying you're doing this. Like, this is a team where I really don't think just need to be harping on the nights where they don't have it. Like, I don't care that they struggled against Charlotte on some weirdo noon game. I don't think that says anything about this team's upside or potential. I think that just speaks to like weird regular season game. What you like, the overall performance is what matters here. And if you have the Knicks net rating, like, you can basically look at net rating season by season. If you go, like, I guarantee you, go look through the last 10 seasons and go through the first 20 games and sort, by net rating. Basically, if you are through that strong of a sample, if you are like a top 10 team by net rating, you're probably pretty good. And you're probably going to be pretty good by the end of the year. And you probably have a good chance of winning a playoff round and maybe have a good chance of making a conference finals. And maybe you even have a chance of making an NBA finals. Like, it's really that simple. And I'm not going to dismiss that, even though, yes, there are nights that I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is brutal. Like, you fucking lose that game to Utah. You lose this game to Charlotte, or maybe game close to losing this game to Charlotte. I get all that. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of that, what I'm saying is like, they still have to, I think they are going with an unconventional path with two defenders who are subpar, right? So I think what I want to, I think that's still going to just be a question. And then we can talk about, but I think that the tragedy of this Knicks season would be they don't even get to find out, right, what it looks like with Mikal Bridges being who we thought he would be, what it looks like with, wing defenders. Like, can we actually do this at full strength, if the plan works? Because I think there's a question if the plan will work. But I'd love to find that out. I know you got to get out of here. I do want to ask you this question before we leave, because it's a question I want to talk about. We ended up talking a lot about the team as a whole. How many teams does Deuce McBride start on? I'm not advocating for him to start on this team right now. I think he's played awesome. I've been a Deuce McBride fan since before the draft. I was thrilled when we got him. I didn't love the other picks on that draft night. How many teams in the league does Deuce McBride start for?
I don't know the exact answer to that, but what I would say is I think you have enough evidence with him that if your team has a quality primary ball handler, creator, whatever, he can definitely start for your team.
Would you take him over Bronny James?
I don't know. Bronny has upside. He's only 19. He's only 19, so that potential is there, right? So
he'd actually be perfect on that team, but I'm glad he's not there. So.
Yeah, he would be annoyingly perfect on the Lakers. All right. Fortunately, got to end it there. Stacy, let the people know where they can find you and plug anything that you would like to plug.
You can find me at Stacy Patton 89. No, I don't have any flags to plant today. I don't want to piss anyone off. So yeah, start any fights.
I have nothing to plug personally. So I will.
Got to show my my maize and blue here, my Eagles green, and guys know I'm rocking the Knicks. So
yeah, I have nothing to plug. So I will plug all the great work that Ryan Day is doing at Ohio State. May it long continue. I will also plug all the actual great work at Strickland. Check it out. Podcast, Strictly NFL. Takes from Obvious Bozos. The Rundown. Sam has done a great job holding that down in the post game. So give all of it a whirl. Aside from that, you can, if you want, you can follow me on Blue Sky or on Twitter at Shwinny. I'm mostly on Blue Sky now, so check that out. I had to do a comeback though after the wonderful game on Saturday. Brief comeback on Twitter, but
don't call it a comeback.
Yeah, mostly on Blue Sky now. All right. Thank you to our sponsor, Bet Online. That is our show for today. I hope everybody has a great week, and I will see you on Friday. Peace.